So, in honor of Mother's Day, I figured I would make a video about my personal journey to motherhood. My husband and I got married back in November of 2013. Shortly after we got married, we decided we weren't going to do anything to prevent a pregnancy. So we stopped using any kind of protection. About 6 months into our marriage, and it just hadn't happened for us. We actually decided to start actively trying to get pregnant. I would, try to track my days and stuff like that, maybe when I was ovulating, but I wasn't very knowledgeable of exactly, like, other than just having unprotected, sex, any other way to get pregnant, other than just some stuff that I had done a little bit of researching on. So that was at about our 6 month mark. So when the year mark of our anniversary was approaching, I was a little concerned the fact that it just hadn't just happened for us. I always maybe thought that I would have a little bit of a difficulty getting pregnant just because my cycles were so irregular, but I didn't really know the extent of how difficult it would be for us. So I was, it became really hard at that point. I thought maybe there was something wrong with me, and to explain more into like my irregular cycles, they were just never consistent. I would, be on my cycle for months and months at a time and maybe only have a few days off, and then it would start back again. And they were really heavy. I never had any kind of menstrual cramping, so that's at least a plus in all of this. But I never really went without a cycle. So we just kept trying and praying that it would eventually happen for us. So a few months before our 2-year anniversary, and we still hadn't gotten pregnant, I made an appointment with my gynecologist. And I went and saw my gynecologist and talked to her about everything. And I finally had my first pap smear. I know that sounds horrible. But she couldn't, see anything obvious that was wrong with me. My pap smears came back great. We ran a lot of blood work and had labs done, and everything came back great. My hormone levels were fine. She said a couple of like the levels were a teeny bit off, but nothing that stood out to her as being the reason why I hadn't gotten pregnant. So she referred me to a fertility specialist. When I left that office, she gave me some birth control pills to take because the fertility specialist would want me to have like a really thin lining when I came in for my first visit. And so I did take that birth control for about 2.5 weeks. It made me really sick. It made me have a really, really heavy cycle. And so I stopped taking it. I did call the fertility specialist, and I got like the packet, like the new patient packet to fill out. And I did fill it out, but I never faxed it back into them, and I never made an appointment. I was just really, discouraged that Jerry, my OBGYN, she wasn't able to tell me anything. She'd been in this field and been doing this for, 20-something years, and the fact that she really couldn't give me any answers really kind of discouraged me. And I was like, well, if she can't tell me anything, how is somebody else going to tell me something? And, I know that's a silly way to think about it, but I was already so, in my own head about already not getting pregnant, and it just, I just kept putting it off. So that was August of 2015, and so around, I guess, the end of November, beginning December, I finally made my appointment for the fertility specialist. So my first appointment was for January 19th, 2016, and my first visit, I did go to them, and I had, sat down, told them all my history, and a little bit more into my history. Of course, they ask you, have you ever had any miscarriages? Have you ever, been on any kind of birth controls, anything like that? And I have never been on any kind of birth control other than when I was about 17 years old, 16 or 17, near the beginning of when I started my period, and having all these irregular cycles. I went to the doctor and got a birth control shot to regulate my cycles, not because I was having sex, but just to regulate my cycles. And it did do that. I only went and got one. I never went and got another one. And it kind of regulated me for a good year before it kind of got out of whack again. And so then, of course, when me and my husband started dating, I was 19. And probably when I was about 20 years old, I lost my virginity to him. So I did go get a shot for protection reasonings. But I had kind of a negative reaction to it. And so I never went and got another one. So those were the only time I'd ever had any kind of birth control. So, but as far as miscarriages go, I've never had a miscarriage. I've never been pregnant. So anyways, so we went in for our vaginal ultrasound, and to backtrack just a little bit, when I did go see Jerry, I told her that I thought I may have a version of PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And usually with people that have polycystic ovarian syndrome, they skip cycles. Not like me. I was constantly on a cycle. So that was the only thing that didn't really line up. But everything else did. The problems getting pregnant and some other things matched, my, I had the symptoms for PCOS. So, Jerry said that she thought that maybe I did have PCOS, but it was a different version of it. But anyways, fast forward to going to my first fertility specialist appointment, and we went in and did a vaginal ultrasound. She, said the lining of my uterus looked really good. It wasn't too thin, it wasn't too thick, nothing looked abnormal about it. And then she went over and looked at my right ovary. And as soon as she kind of like zeroed in on my right ovary, she said that I had what they refer to as like a polycystic ovary. And she said it looks like a string of pearls. Like most ovaries are in a circle. And normal ovaries that are full of eggs kind of look like a chocolate chip cookie. They, the eggs in the ovaries are just, tossed, kind of sporadically, randomly in there. There's no kind of like formation or pattern or anything. They're just inside your ovary. And so on a sonogram machine, it just kind of looks like a chocolate chip cookie. But my ovary actually looked like a necklace, like a pearl necklace. And so they refer to it as like the string of pearls. And it's where like basically all of the eggs are kind of like in a circle on the inner lining of my ovary. And so she said it definitely looked like I had a polycystic ovary. And so they wanted to, run a couple more tests and stuff, but they, assured me that all that stuff could kind of be fixed with medication. And so, it was probably an easy fix. Because all polycystic ovarian syndrome is basically it's like a hormonal imbalance in your body, and your body's just not producing the hormones needed to mature eggs and then to ovulate that egg. So if you're not maturing and ovulating eggs, then you can't get pregnant. So, but she didn't understand where all the like bleeding was coming from, because I'd never had any pain that didn't quite fit, like if I had cysts or any thing like that. And so she wanted to run she wanted to do a saline injection sonogram, an SIS. I believe that's what SIS stands for. Don't quote me, I'm not a doctor. But it's just like a vaginal ultrasound or sonogram, whatever. And but they shoot saline into your uterus so that they can get better images of what the inside of your uterus looks like. So she wanted to schedule that. So I had to wait until my next cycle, which would have been in February. So they just told me to give them a call on the first day of my next cycle so that they could schedule that SIS. And so, of course, this SIS has to be done between the window of like you stop bleeding in your cycle and before your lining starts to thicken again. because they want it to be thin so that they can get clear, images of what the lining of your uterus and inside your uterus looks like. So it has to be during like day, 7 to 10 or something like that in your cycle. So, it's a pretty small window. Anyways, so February rolls around and my cycle never started. So, of course, I'm getting excited because I'm like, oh, wow, I'm late. I'm never late. Maybe I'm pregnant. So, I took a pregnancy test like every day for a week, and they were all negative. So, I finally called the fertility specialist, and I talked to Dee and told her, what was going on. And she, made me an appointment and wanted me to come in, and that they would do some blood work, and they'd go in and do a vaginal ultrasound and see what was going on. So we went in to do a vaginal ultrasound, and she noticed that when she looked at my left ovary that I had a really matured follicle, which what a follicle is it's basically like what eggs grow inside of, if I'm explaining that correctly. You can Google all this if I'm not really making any sense to you. Like I said, I'm not a doctor. I'm just going off of what they've explained to me. But anyways, I had a really large follicle. It was almost completely matured, which is really weird for me because that never obviously happens because I have PCOS. So, of course, she sent me home with a lot of homework from me and my husband, and she wanted me to come back in a few days. I believe that was on a Tuesday. So she wanted me to come back on Friday to see if I had ovulated that egg. So I went back in Friday. My husband and I went in Friday, and it was still there. And it had gotten a little bit bigger, but not, major, like significantly bigger, but it had definitely grown in size. So she sent us home with more homework, and she wanted us to come back in Sunday morning. So, my husband and I told ourselves that we were not going to let ourselves get really excited or, think that necessarily anything was going to come of it. But, of course, it's something we've been wanting for a while. 2 years going on 3 that we couldn't help but get excited. So we went back in on Sunday, and as soon as we walked in the door, she pretty much told me that, if the follicle is still there, then it's probably not, I don't know how to word it, not like a real one, like it doesn't really have an egg inside of it, and that it's probably not going to ovulate, and, obviously that means that I wouldn't be getting pregnant if it wasn't going to ovulate. But she said, but if it's not there, then we'll give it 2 weeks, and I'd come back in and do some blood work to see if I was pregnant. So, of course, during the few seconds that it takes to get prepped to have the vaginal ultrasound to see if it's still there or if it was gone, I was praying that it was going to be gone, and it was there still. So she told me that they were going to give me some medicine to make me start my period. So she sent it into the pharmacy, and I went and picked it up, and I just couldn't bring myself to take it. I wanted to give my body another 2 weeks and see if I would start my cycle on my own or not. And if in 2 weeks, I hadn't started my period, I was going to take a test, and if it was negative, then I was going to take the medication. But my body started working again, I guess you could say, about a week later, and I started my cycle. So I did call and tell her that I started my cycle so that we could get that SIS scheduled, but they actually did not have an opening for me to get in during like the window when I would need to have the SIS done. So I had to wait till the following, which was in April. So January, March, April, So I finally was able to get, to backtrack a little bit before April, in March, when my cycle finally did start, it never stopped. So I went again and had a vaginal ultrasound done, and when she went in and looked, usually when you're on your cycle, when you're bleeding, it's because the lining of your uterus is shedding. So that is what's causing you to bleed. So the lining of your uterus while your cycle is on is really thin. So we went in and had the vaginal ultrasound, and the one thing that she noticed that was really weird about the lining of my uterus is even though I was bleeding, it was still really, really thick. So that didn't really make any sense to her. And when she looked at my ovaries, and my left ovary seemed to have a pretty matured follicle in it, she was like, that's so weird. It looks like your body's fixing to ovulate, but you're still bleeding. So that doesn't really make any sense. So, she said the only thing that would explain, the lining of your uterus being really thick or the bleeding, it would be if you had like a cyst or something like that that would be bleeding and it's not actually your cycle. So she was like, I'm definitely interested to see when we finally can get your SIS scheduled, what the results would be. But anyways, she ended up giving me some medicine to make me stop my period. And she said, it's going to make you stop and you might have a few days off, but once your cycle starts back, it's going to be really horrible. It's going to be really heavy and you're going to hate me. But she said that's what we need to happen. We need to shed that lining of your uterus so that we can get in there and do the SSI. Or SIS, I'm sorry. So fast forward to April. I go in, I believe it was April the 19th, to have my SIS done. And it was on a Tuesday. And so, they went in there and did that. I'm sure you can Google and look up exactly what it is. But it's pretty much where they insert a catheter into your uterus. And they release saline solution into your uterus through the catheter. And they go in with the, like a vaginal ultrasound and take images of the inside of your uterus while the fluid is in there, because it kind of opens it up and, it gives like a distinguished, different colors so that they can actually see in there. So I had to wait until that Friday to get the results, and they called and they told me I had a uterine polyp. But I was scheduled to go back in 2 weeks from the 19th. So I think that was like May the 2nd or the 3rd. It was something like that that I had my follow-up appointment to talk to Dr. Hawkins about the results of the SIS. I did end up going to the follow-up appointment, and I found out that not only do I have a pretty good sized uterine polyp on the left side of my uterus, but I also I possibly have a uterine septum. And what that is I don't really know exactly how to explain it. You would kind of have to just look it up if you want to know more. I'd hate to try to explain it and explain it incorrectly. I know what it is, and from my understanding is it's pretty much like scar tissue, and it pretty much goes down the center of my uterus, and it's not good, because if they were to go ahead and start the fertility treatments, even, with the septum and the polyp being there, because those two things are not preventing me from getting pregnant, but they could cause me to miscarry. If, I ovulate and the egg implants on my septum, it won't, like, the pregnancy would not be successful, because I would probably miscarry, because it can't thrive on the septum, because all it is scar tissue. And then the same goes for the polyp. The polyp is pretty much like extra tissue as well. So I am going to have surgery at the end of this month. May 26th is my surgery date. And they will go in and they will remove the polyp. And while they're in there, they're going to test my tubes to make sure I don't have any blockages with my tubes. And they're also going to check out my septum. They will be going in through my uterus and through my navel to get better pictures of what exactly is going on in there and how severe the septum is. So that's where I am at this point. It seemed like a really short, summed up version. This has been the hardest journey that I've ever been on, and with it being Mother's Day, it just reminds me again, another year that I'm not a mother yet. But I just keep pushing through and hoping that, all of this will be worth it, and that maybe here in a short couple months we will finally be expecting a baby, and I can't wait for that. The recovery time with the surgery isn't too bad. because it is an outpatient procedure. They will be putting me under, but it is outpatient. If they don't have to mess with the septum, because my doctor did say that, if the septum wasn't really major and it was just, really small, then they weren't going to worry about it, and they would just leave it alone. And, but, so if all they have to do is remove the polyp, then it'll be a couple days of recovery, just me taking it easy. And then come my next cycle, we can go ahead and start the fertility stuff. But if they do have to remove the septum, then of course it'll be, a good week or so of healing. But I will have to wait a good 3 cycles, so about 3 months, before we could start the fertility medications. So, that's a little scary, and I really won't know what to expect until after I wake up, because I will be signing some paperwork, pretty much giving them the right to do whatever they feel is necessary once they get in there. So that's a little scary and stressful, and just because I can't pre-plan or know exactly what to expect, but I'm just trying to stay positive. And I have a great husband who is really supportive, and he's kind of looking at this point is to get this polyp removed and stuff for my health. And so of course I'm looking at it more as, let's go ahead and do what we got to do so we can go ahead and get a baby on the way, which of course is what he wants as well. But he's trying to look at it from a different angle, that even if, heaven forbid, we do all this and it still doesn't lead to me getting pregnant, at least it's better for me health-wise to go ahead and have this stuff addressed. And so, trying to look at it that way as well. But of course I want a baby. But it has been really hard, and I do have, not only a supportive husband, but supportive family and friends. And like I said, it's been really hard. I have definitely questioned my faith a lot, and there's been things that have happened along the way that have helped in that area. And YouTube has really been one of those biggest outlets for me, and so that's kind of why I wanted to start documenting my journey to motherhood on YouTube. Yeah, so maybe there's somebody else out there going through the same thing as I am, and maybe my story and my journey will help them, give them hope, as have a lot of different ladies on YouTube's journey. I'm definitely thankful for that outlet, because I have learned so much, through other women that have been through similar things, even before I found out, what all was going on with me. So, but yeah, so if you care to hear follow-ups and care to follow along with my journey to motherhood, then stay tuned, because I will be posting updates as things happen. So as of right now, we're just waiting for May 26th to get here and get the surgery done and see what's next. So yeah, happy Mother's Day to all of you, and I know that hopefully by next Mother's Day I will be either expecting a baby or I will be a mother. Thanks. Bye.